Welcome to Music Row, a backstage pass to your favorite country artists. Here's your host, Leake.
Hey, welcome back to the show. Another great episode. Thank you for tuning in. And if you haven't already done so, hit the like, hit the favorites, hit subscribe, whatever platform you're listening on. I know there's all different buttons and things. Makes a big difference to us because we know the show is getting to you each and every episode that we release. This is Music Row. My name is indeed Leake. Journalist, author, music columnist, Geoffrey Himes joins us on today's program. Geoffrey has written a number of books. He has also been a music journalist for a number of papers, including the Washington Post, the New York Times. He's written books for Country Music Hall of Fame and so on. On today's program, we talk with Geoffrey Himes about his newest book, Willie Nelson, All the Albums, the stories behind the music. So Geoffrey just went out and said, give me all the albums from Willie Nelson, all 152, and I'll tell the story in and around it. It's a really good read. We'll talk to how that came to be, and of course, we will talk about Willie Nelson. So lots of Willie Nelson on today's program. If you've been paying attention to the socials, there's been a lot of craziness about Dolly Parton's health this week. Some social pages are saying that Dolly's family is asking for prayers. There's memes out there of famous country celebrities at Dolly's bedside. Well, Dolly being Dolly took it into her own hands and posted herself on social media to put all rumors to rest. Here's the post she put on X.
Well, today's October the 8th, and obviously I'm here doing some commercials for the Grand Ole Opry, which is why I'm dressed kind of like a country western girl. But before I got started, I wanted to say, I know lately everybody thinks that I am sicker than I am. Do I look sick to you? I'm working hard here. Anyway, I wanted to put everybody's mind at ease, those of you that seem to be real concerned, which I appreciate. And I appreciate your prayers because I'm a person of faith. I can always use the prayers for anything and everything. But I want you to know that I'm okay. I've got some problems, as I mentioned, back when my husband Carl was very sick. That was for a long time. And then when he passed, I didn't take care of myself. So I let a lot of things go that I should have been taken care of. So anyway, when I got around to it, the doctor said, we need to take care of this. We need to take care of that. Nothing major, but I did have to cancel some things so I could be closer to home, closer to Vanderbilt, you know, where I'm kind of having a few treatments here and there. But I wanted you to know that I'm not dying. Did you see that AI picture of Reba and me? Oh, Lordy. I mean, they had Reba at my deathbed, and we both look like we need to be buried. But and I thought, oh, my Lord. But if I was really dying, I don't think Reba would be the one at my deathbed. She might come visit me earlier. But anyway, there's just a lot of rumors flying around. But I figured if you heard it from me, you'd know that I was okay. So anyhow, that's what I wanted to say. And I'm not ready to die yet. I don't think God is through with me, and I ain't done working. So I love you for caring, and keep praying for me.
Setting the world straight again, Dolly Parton. Coming up, Geoffrey Himes speaking to his new book, Willie Nelson, All the Albums, after this.
Wherever there's a heartbeat and a stage, there's an artist set to perform. This is Music Row on Tour.
Brought to you by the Pecan Agency, connecting fans with bands worldwide. Catch Lainey Wilson, the Whirlwind World Tour, November 1st in Woodlands, Texas. Benchmark International Arena on November 7th in Tampa Bay, Florida. And if you haven't heard yet, Cody Johnson had to cut the remaining dates of his tour due to a ruptured eardrum, forcing him to go in for emergency surgery. He says he's sorry to all his fans. I say to the fans who are upset with this, get over it. Cody Johnson will be back on the road in the new year. Coming up, Geoffrey Himes on the Music Row podcast.
Hi, my name is Kim Stockwood. I am a proud Newfoundlander and a Canadian singer-songwriter. In a landscape where many lack access to health benefits or employee assistance programs, the Unison Fund serves as a lifeline of hope for musicians and music industry professionals facing medical emergencies or mental health challenges. To learn more about Unison and their programs, please visit unisonfund.ca.
Geoffrey, you've been working as a journalist now for a few decades. You're working with the Washington Post. You've done stories for the Times, Rolling Stone, a couple of books under your belt. This book that you have released right now has to be one of the bigger undertakings, I would say, of your career. Willie Nelson, all the albums. Did you get into a conversation with somebody along the way and say, hey, this is what I'm planning on doing? And they went, are you serious?
No, what actually happened was I had talked to this editor, about doing a Marty Stewart book a bunch of years ago, and it never worked out for a number of reasons. And then he called me last year, just as I had just finished a book for the Country Music Hall of Fame called In-Law Country, how Emmylou Harris, Roseanne Cash, and their circle fashioned a new kind of country music. And Dennis Pernew, my editor, called and said, would you be interested in doing a book on Willie Nelson? And I said, yeah, probably. And we talked about the different details. And I've, of course, I've interviewed Willie a couple times, and I've written many, many stories about him. So I had a lot of already acquired knowledge to go on. So that made it easier. And, he's somebody I've always loved and enjoyed thinking about and writing about. So I just jumped in, and they wanted a quick turnaround. So I did it in the next 7 months or so. The one thing that this company does a lot of coffee table books. I said that I don't want to do just a coffee table book, and I don't want to just do an annotated discography. I want to do a real book, a narrative. So there's a 150,000 word narrative in this book, even though there's a lot of pictures and there's like a little box about each of the 152 albums that I discuss. But there's also a story about Willie's life as told through his recordings. That's the book I really wanted to write.
And I think you did a fantastic job, because when I first heard about the idea of you breaking apart each of the albums, that's kind of a crazy undertaking. And I don't know how interesting it's going to be. But the way you wove in the stories of what Willie was doing at that time really does set a tone for each of these releases. You say that you've had conversations with Willie Nelson over the years. If Willie has 152 albums, how many albums do you think are missing from Willie Nelson?
That he recorded and didn't release? Or
such a prolific writer, and the fact that he's recorded so much content since the 50s is quite astounding. But I'm guessing, though, there must be some recordings that are just kind of out there that just got put on a shelf and forgotten about. Because if you're writing nonstop, basically he's writing every single day for this archive.
Yeah, so there are a lot of rumors about what's in the vault. Once he had his own home studio at his golf course out in Spicewood, Texas, whenever he was done playing golf for the day, he would go in and record, with whoever was around, visiting friends, his kids, his band, and whatever. It's not quite accurate to say that he's always writing, because he has gone through some dry spells. When you dig into these records the way I did, you discover that a lot of the records he wrote in the early 60s, right when he was like a struggling songwriter and just trying to make a name for himself, he kept recording again and again over the decades. That there's this thing called the Pamper demos, which was there's a music publishing company called Pamper Music, which was run by Ray Price, the singer and a businessman. And they spotted Willie's talent before other people did and hired him as a staff writer, thanks in large part to Hank Cochran, who was already a writer there, a great songwriter in his own right. So when you're young and hungry and trying to make a name for yourself, the songs can just pour out of you. And that's what happened to Willie. And a lot of his greatest songs were all in that Pamper demo era from like 59 to 66. So what's interesting about Willie is that he's a terrific singer-songwriter. He writes great songs. He sings them beautifully. But he's also a very important interpretive singer of other people's songs. You think of all the songwriting tribute albums he did, the songs of Chris Christopherson, the songs of Cindy Walker, songs of Rodney Crowell just this year. When he did the American Songbook albums like Stardust and so on, that's a whole other side of his talent, is taking a pre-existing song and making it his own, Pancho and Lefty, for example. So there's these two sides of his talent. Yeah, there probably is stuff in the vaults, but who knows?
You mentioned Ray Price and bringing him in as a staff writer. In your opinion, that if Ray had not done that at that time, that maybe Willie Nelson might have just gone away from songwriting altogether?
Seems unlikely. I think he's one of those guys who had the fire and had to do it. It took him a long time to get to Ray Price. He bounced around the country, Oregon to California to Arkansas, Missouri, and all around Texas, trying to make a living, trying to find a place in music. He sold encyclopedias, he sold vacuum cleaners, he was a disc jockey, played in other people's bands, he'd played his own bands. It wasn't not an overnight success kind of story, we should say.
And the time that he was a disc jockey, which you do mention in the book, it was early in his career in Texas. I guess he was all around Texas, radio stations, probably syndicated or just same repeaters. Willie wasn't afraid to play his own stuff and promote his own stuff. And in a way, it was kind of like, modern day podcast today, where you can speak to other people's products, yet also promote you, saying, I will be appearing at the following Saturday, Sunday, Monday, whichever it is. So he was kind of a trailblazer, where a lot of people, I've heard this throughout the years, I don't want to talk about me and my music. I want to talk about everybody else's. And I think it's just all come around again.
Yeah, that was certainly not the case at early country radio.
Right.
It's like everybody from that era that you can think of had a radio show at some point where they were, from the Everly Brothers to the Carter family to Chet Atkins to Latin Scruggs, to Bill Monroe. They all had 15-minute a day or 30-minute a day radio show where they would play a couple songs, deliver the commercials themselves, and then pump up their next live engagement in the area. So that was a thing. It was not something that Willie invented. It was a thing in country radio at the time. They weren't getting paid much as disc jockeys, so it was sort of a necessity to get people to come out to hear their live shows. You were talking a minute ago about songwriting and would he have stuck with it if he hadn't had the breaks that he did have. What's really interesting about him is even after he had that early success as a songwriter, where Patsy Cline did Crazy and Farron Young did Hello Walls and Ray Price did Nightlife, and he had some real success. He was one of the hot songwriters in Nashville, and he could very easily have just made that his career. People encouraged him to make that his career. So he could be like another Harlan Howard or Budo Bryant. But performing live was the ultimate goal in his mind, always, from the time he was a teenager. And so he kept making records. They weren't selling, but, other people were having hits with his songs, but he wasn't having hits with his songs. So it was frustrating, but he stuck at it. And then finally, after a long gestation period, Red-Headed Stranger happened.
Geoffrey Himes, award-winning journalist. New book is titled Willie Nelson, All the Albums. A book that explores all the albums that Willie has released, but also speaks to the time and the state that Willie was in at the particular time, which is, again, it's not autobiographical, but it definitely leans into the history much more than I think most people would when they see the cover of the book. I'm going to say, might sound odd to you, but he had a very good business savvy to a point about him. And that was, he understood, or someone had told him along the way, there's value in owning your material. We all know, it's very well documented, that he wasn't very good at paying the bank or paying the feds.
Paying the taxes.
But that was something that was definitely early in his mind early on, that there was value in songs.
Well, there's two sides to that story. When he was really hungry and really hard pressed financially, he would try to sell his songs to people. There's a famous story He tried to sell Hello Walls to Farron Young for a pit. It's like $100 or something. And Farron said, no, you don't want to do this. This is going to be a hit song. Let me lend you $500 and you could pay me back later. Trust me, you don't want to do this. And of course, it was a big hit song. And there's a funny story in that Farron did say, no, you don't need to pay me back. And then decades later, Willie gave him a bull that was worth like $37,000. So it was a very good payback on the $500 investment. And the same thing in Houston. He tried to sell Nightlife. And in fact, he did sell the rights to Nightlife to Paul Buskirk, who was a guitarist in Houston. So I think he learned his lesson that he took care of his copyright after that. But it took him, he had some near misses where he could have like really given away the store.
And then when he did receive the financial success, he was very generous with his money.
He's not someone I would hire as a financial advisor. Let's put it that way.
But generous with his time, generous
with his money to a fault. If you had a sob story, it's a good chance that Willie would give you some money. He had ex-wives, he had lots of children, he had friends. They were always needed a little bit of money, and so it was part of what led him into the problem with the IRS later. But I've only talked to Willie a few times, but you get this sense from him that things just roll off his shoulder. He's not impressed by his own success. He's not impressed by money. He loves music. He loves playing to large crowds. And as long as he can do that, he's fine.
You would have had to get clearance from Willie Nelson and his side to release this book. Was there any wording that they gave back?
Actually, I didn't have to get clearance any more than someone who's writing about President Trump would need to get clearance to write a book about him. I'm not using copyrighted material. I'm just, it's my observations on a part of American history. And
do you know if he's received a copy yet?
I don't know. I haven't heard anything back from his camp yet. I'm sure he'll be aware of it.
With this book available now, you can find it wherever the better bookstores are sold or are selling quality music books. Not drama, not horror, quality music books. And I like the fact that it is not a coffee table book. As much as those are fun, you cannot get into the story. You cannot hold something that is 30 pounds in your lap and read what the 150,000 words that you have penned for this book. And you need that. Just going through the book itself, you still managed to put in some wonderful images from the history of Willie Nelson. And whoever was doing the digging on that.
There is a lot of illustrations, and it's a very handsome book, which I had little to do with, but the company did a great job.
It's a great book to have in any music collector's archive. And it's not about you do not need to know one song by Willie Nelson to appreciate this book itself. So very well done, Geoffrey.
Well, thank you.
I appreciate you taking the time to have a chat with me, and much success. Do you have another book already being worked on?
Yeah, I'm working on a rock and roll book about former punk musicians who sort of evolve into more sort of classic rock musicians. It's called East Street Punks. It's like, the Bottle Rockets and Drive-By Truckers and Alejandro Escobedo bands, acts like that. And, I think if people are interested in my writing, the In-Law Country book is, I think, is an argument that there's this group of artists who've been overlooked in country music history, like Emmylou Harris and Roseanne Cash and Rodney Crowell and Guy Clark and Steve Earle and Ricky Skaggs, that all sort of wrote songs for each other, played on each other's albums, married each other, and it's a cohesive movement that hasn't gotten the recognition that it deserves. So that's that book. And I wrote a book about Bruce Springsteen a while ago too, so called Born in the USA.
I love the idea of these well-known but kind of looked past artists. I just saw that Steve Earle just got into the Grand Ole Opry. Like, one of those things you can just maybe go, what? How did that just happen? You would think that would have happened 3 decades ago.
Right.
Thank you very much for taking time to speak with me, Geoffrey. What's the best place to find you online?
I have a new podcast myself called Hard Rain and Pink Cadillacs, which is on Substack. We do some podcasts. We do a blog magazine about music. And, Google my name. A lot of stuff.
Thanks for doing this. We'll check out your program. Geoffrey Himes, everyone.
Follow Music Row on X at Music Row Country. On Instagram at Music Row Official. Music Row is produced by Shed of Dreams.